You've reached the Signal Watch, movies, television, comics, and more. I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Join me and our cadre of co-contributors as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work.
You're listening to Avengers Chronological Countdown with Jamie and Ryan.
Hi, and welcome to a podcast that's going to be an unholy mess.
That was enthusiastic.
Well, this is a little intimidating. We didn't do a Falcon and Winter Soldier podcast just basically out of laziness.
Yeah, and we watched it like 3-4 months ago?
Yeah, but my friend Heather gave me a hard time about the fact we didn't do one, and now I feel bad, so
we're going to combine it with Loki, which we just watched.
Sure. So, Falcon and the Winter Soldier was one that I think it was supposed to have been the first Marvel show.
Right.
And probably would have been well served to have been the first Marvel show. Mm-hmm. I mean,
from where Endgame left off.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And kind of people's expectations. One of the things that's been really interesting, I know we talked about this in the WandaVision podcast, but has been seeing the TV shows get as weird as comics get. And people just going, okay. Like, I always thought, like, okay, you can do kind of a certain level of superhero movie and comics movie before you lose the audience. Mm-hmm. But comics get weird, as evidenced by WandaVision.
Yeah. And I mean, I think when Guardians came out, that was also a surprise that people said, okay. But this is even more so because it has more to do with the depth of the story.
Yeah. So, Falcon and Winter Soldier is very much in line with what you've already gotten from your Captain America movies. Mm-hmm. It's like basically we're doing James Bond espionage action type stuff, but you can expect there's, flying suits and things like that. There's going to be people who are super strong and other cool stunts that you're going to have in there. But, basically people will have human motivations. And I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier was really hard for people to kind of get their heads around after WandaVision.
Oh, because it was so normal?
I think there was that. I think it didn't have the kind of pizzazz of here's this completely crazy setup we're going to walk you through.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing about it is it was, despite all of that, Wanda's story was incredibly personal. Mm-hmm. And it was something that, strip all the rest of it away, it was about someone grieving.
Right.
And Falcon and Winter Soldier is entirely about abstractions that we're currently dealing with as a nation anyway.
Yes.
And I think that was a little harder to translate into kind of the big gut punches of an action story. I don't know if it necessarily had to be that much more complicated, but they never really brought it to the same, except for Sam dealing with the the stuff that came out of the Truth comics from the mid-aughts, I don't know that it quite hit the same notes as far as like everyone can kind of relate to what Wanda was going through, even if you've never been through that. But it's a little harder to understand, like, hey, there's big, massive, rich people powers who are making arbitrary decisions about what happens with other people, and that actually impacts people, and so they're going to push back.
I do think they made it personal, though, with his decision not to become Captain America initially. Because he didn't think the country was ready for a black Captain America. And they did delve into that, especially with Carl Lumbly's character.
Yeah.
And I don't know. That part for me really worked.
I mean, I agree. And that was what I was trying to say. Is like, yeah, of like Sam's personal journey, I think works about as well of the like 2 or 3 major plot threads that they had going. Mm-hmm. I think the overall plot actually has a lot to say about kind of how governments and powerful organizations operate in this, you know, like we've abstracted everything and we're just dealing with everything on a spreadsheet in a tower in New York, which is as far from all of this, you know, versus what's actually happening in like Eastern Europe and all of these things. And I think that they did as good of a job maybe as they could have, given their time constraints and the other things they tried to tackle in the series.
Yeah.
Because they never outright, I don't think they were saying the Flag Smashers by the end were any more, they were villainous in that they needed to be stopped because they were going to murder people.
Right. But they had points.
Yeah.
They had good points. They just went about it in a weird way.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting to see, you know, we were sitting around a few months ago with some friends who are not into superhero stuff at all. And my friend Scott said, well, I'd just like to see one of these things where it wasn't solved with people punching each other. And I was like, yeah, me too. I mean, real honestly. And this came as close to that as pretty much anything I've seen to date.
Yeah, and I think that's what they were trying to do with Sam's speech at the end, but I think it was handled a little bit awkwardly. Like, I don't know what a better solution would have been, but him just talking at people and them allowing him to do that seemed a little unrealistic.
Yeah, it felt to me like they were like, here's all the things that someone would say back to someone, anticipating that as much as they could, letting a few people ask questions. I don't think they stuck the landing. It was not Carrie Strug, you know, putting her hands out and being heroic there. It felt like they kind of bobbled that last part. Mm-hmm. And you could kind of imagine Steve saying exactly the right couple of things, and everyone going, Steve, and then him like, I'm out of here. Yeah. And that's not what they did.
No. But I mean, they also had a lot to wrap up. Yeah. In that segment.
And and frankly, the show apparently had all kinds of production problems because of COVID. And I don't know how much that impacted it. I don't know what order they shot things in. But I do, you know, I think if nothing else that the show will have accomplished for those who actually watched it all the way through, because I understand it's not been watched as much as WandaVision or Loki, is it, if Sam in the next movie had just shown up with a shield, it would not have been accepted. Yeah. And Sam's acceptance of the shield in the role, whether you agree with his politics a whole ton or not, at least got you to the point where if he shows up again and he's in the suit and says, I'm Captain America, you're just going to go, uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, this was a necessary connection.
Yeah.
That needed to happen.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm glad it got 6 episodes. Because the number of, you know, issues they had to explore to get him there needed more than just a movie, probably.
Yeah.
That would have had to deal with a driving plot that wasn't, him considering the role. It was, yeah.
Yeah, and if you've not, I mean, it's really weird because I don't think they've collected the miniseries Truth came out, I'd say in like 2003, 2004. We were living in Phoenix. That's what I remember.
Oh.
And I mean, even when they people get worried, oh man, I hate it when comics get their politics in them or whatever.
Comics have always had politics.
Sure. And it's not like, Tucker Carlson or whomever can, get their panties in a bunch about the fact that, they do that from time to time, and they always act like this is the first time this has ever happened every time. And it's like, well, anytime you go to the newsstand or a comic shop any month, you can pull a couple of titles off who are trying to say something. But yeah, the Truth comic, when it came out, if you knew anything about the Tuskegee experiments, was a little hard. I mean, it was some hard going, and what happens with Isaiah Bradley in the comics is actually a lot rougher than what happened with Isaiah, and I'm not going to spoil it for anyone because I'm hoping they'll recollect it in the wake of, they couldn't put it out before the series because it would have spoiled, and for a long time, honestly, I've kind of known what was going to happen in movies. Because Marvel would be like, oh, we've got to re-release this or that. I was like, oh, I guess that's what they're going to cover, in the movie. But they've gotten a little more savvy about that. So I'm hoping Truth will be collected or show up on Comixology or somewhere where you can read it. And it's definitely a good read. It's well worth checking out.
I know we're still talking about the plot of this, but yeah. I just have to say, like. So the Emmy nominations just came out, and Don Cheadle, of all people, he's great. I love Don Cheadle, but he was in this for maybe 6 minutes, and he got an Emmy nomination for this.
I think they said he was in a total of it, like, on screen for like 80 seconds.
Okay, 80 seconds, even worse. But I mean,
people love Don Cheadle.
I was thinking while I was watching it, Carl Lumbly needs to get some attention for this.
Yeah.
Because his parts were so moving and so, frankly, informative. Like, if you didn't know any, I mean, I guess it doesn't come out and say this is not entirely fiction. Mm-hmm. I mean, because it's a fictional show. But if you know anything about, the history of this country, it seems pretty obvious.
Yeah.
So,
and if this podcast is where you're finding that out...
Yeah, I really hope not. Because I am not a historian. I'm not the person that should be talking about this, but...
yeah.
It was he had a scene that brought me to tears. It was just heartbreaking.
He's always good. I mean, he brought like crazy gravitas when he showed up to Supergirl, which is not the world's most groundbreaking show.
Jeez, I forgot about that.
But yeah, I thought it was great casting. And
he has an excellent point. He's trying to encourage Sam, just don't do it. It's, you don't owe them anything. Mm-hmm. And Sam has a different perspective. Mm-hmm. And I think he eventually comes around to his decision. It still wouldn't have, changed his mind at all, because of all of the shit that he went through. But he understands Sam's position. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought the kind of little wrap-up scene between the two of them was really good. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think, it's kind of talking on a level that's maybe a little more academic or abstract. And that's not to say that it's a better, thing to talk about or a worse thing to talk about. I just think it's, clearly something that we don't deal particularly well in abstractions. It's a lot easier to understand raw human emotion. And, I'm actually hoping, that we get, more Captain America. I will say the one thing that made my tummy turn a little bit watching it was seeing Sharon turn heel.
I don't know where exactly they're going with her. But yeah, I can't really talk to her story arc in this because I've never read any Sharon Carter, and so I don't know what, if anything, of this is stemming from the comics.
As far as I know, and I've seen only modest amounts of Sharon Carter stuff, it's entirely new.
Made up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I might be wrong, but the Power Broker in the comics is like a dude. Like, he's just a guy who they call the Power Broker, who was like giving people superpowers. And I think we've talked about it at some other point for some reason, but he was, I think, the guy who was running the like weird WWF superhero thing that they had in the comics in the 80s. And like working with a guy named Dr. Carl Malice. I am trying to like piece memories together from like my brain from middle school, but I don't remember who he was or what he looked like or anything. But he was not sitting in where did they go to, Madripoor?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay. So Madripoor, I think, first showed up in like Wolverine #1 as this kind of like Singapore's crazy neighbor sort of thing, where, you know, it's like where Singapore's like super clean and got its stuff together super well. Like Madripoor's like Bizarro land of that.
Sure.
And it's like you could actually say like, oh, we have a place now in the Marvel U where there's like pirates hanging out, or, you know, if you want to say guns are running through somewhere, or drugs, or they're doing, you know, experiments on mutants or whatever.
It also looks really expensive.
Yeah, but also looks really expensive. So it's the all-purpose, Far Eastern hangout of our heroes from time to time. And I'm kind of wondering if they couldn't use it until they had the rights when they bought Fox, but I don't know for certain. And I did like the scenes in Madripoor. I thought they were, you know, pretty well done. I liked the bits where Sam had to play, you know, against type. And,
right.
And was not, he was as an actor, Anthony Mackie was playing a guy who couldn't act very well.
Right, that's always fun. And Zemo was in those scenes, and he, you know, bringing him back, I think, was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Zemo in the comics has kind of been all over the map as far as like hero, anti-hero, villain. I mean, mostly anti-hero and villain. But, you know, they've flirted with making him a hero from time to time. So making him kind of, he's not a clear-cut, like, he's out to destroy the world kind of character, and have this, you know, kind of weird, noble sense of honor that he seems to have, but he's also a little bit of a snake in the grass. He's not Doom. I mean, when we get to Doom eventually in the Marvel U, then you're going to really see some weird aristocracy craziness. But, and I know Stephen Harms will be very excited when Dr. Doom shows up. But yeah, it's anyway, I thought I really enjoyed the reemergence of Zemo, because I thought he was great as a character in Civil War, and he was probably on screen for 15 minutes, something like that.
I mean, he was kind of just the shit stirrer for, you know, the Avengers fight.
Yeah. And there's a thing where, you know, they ended a fight or ended a movie without a fight. Black Panther didn't beat him up. They just sat on top of a mountain and talked about things.
Yeah. Honestly, when you mentioned that, the ending of this, that popped into my head, that's not the first time that has happened. That's what came to mind.
Yeah. Anything else on Falcon and Winter Soldier? It's our debut of the Contessa.
Yeah, and also U.S. Agent.
Right.
Which we didn't talk about
at all. So, I think I've talked about before in other podcasts about Captain America the Power Broker, that's where I was talking about. Okay. That was where he got his powers from.
Okay.
And my first Captain America comics were when Steve quit and John Walker became Captain America. Now they treat it more like a guy in those early comics that I read. I only read a few of them, of like a guy with imposter syndrome. And Taskmaster, of all people, who shows up in Black Widow, who, if you check out our Black Widow podcast, is a guy, A, in the comics, and B, he has a personality, but he also trained John Walker to how to use the shield.
Oh, okay.
Because there's some cool scenes of, and the scenes with Lamar, like going, oh, I'm getting a costume too, and I get to participate. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. I honestly thought that Wyatt Russell did such a good job in this, because you kind of hate the guy. I mean, just from the go. He's exactly who they need him to be. He's a guy that, he's not Steve. He kind of looks the part, but he's not him. And he ends up having some real emotional issues with that kind of just explode.
Yeah. I mean, it's I don't think in any way it's like a criticism of, like the U.S. military or anything like that. But, I mean, the guy's a soldier who's trained to do a particular thing, and you kind of have this realization, as a spoiler, he's, killing someone with the shield of, A, that's not what a shield is for, B, that's not what Steve ever was.
No.
Steve was doing something.
He was so much more than that. Like, yeah. He was a really good guy who happened to be able to, jump over a building, or, well, not over a building, but...
But he was also, his role was not hunt and kill, right? I mean, and that was part of the tension he had with S.H.I.E.L.D. was kind of, what are you going to be doing for us as one of our guys? We want to be able to drop you onto a boat and have you be a team player. Steve's not carrying a gun anymore by the time you get to Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
He's bouncing the shield off, all these Belgian guys' foreheads instead of...
he's just giving him concussions.
Yeah. But he's not, just shooting him or whatever at that point. So, it's an interesting... and it was funny. I was telling some folks as the series was wrapping up, we always had a Friday afternoon meeting, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna go watch Captain America before it Falcon and Winter Soldier before it gets spoiled for me. And I mean, you're talking like 10 people on the Zoom call, and like 7 of them completely varied from all different walks of life, are all like, oh, I hate John Walker, and they're all like, oh, I hate that guy.
Hilarious. He did his job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see, in kind of Sharon's got her arc at the end of this, what they're going to do with John Walker, because the U.S. Agent in the comics' job is to kind of be not Steve Rogers. I mean, he's still running around. He had a mini-series not too long ago. So,
yeah.
I mean, they did it in kind of the run-up to, or during the release of this show. So, we need to sell a John Walker comic. But he is still around. He didn't get, bumped off because he was a jerk. And so I'm curious to see if they try and do a little bit more redemption. Because they did set him up as, he's not a horrible guy, which is kind of everyone's takeaway. He has this... wife he obviously cares a lot about. He cares very much that he does a good job, and that's part of why he's so destroyed is, he thought he would be able to do this thing. He couldn't. So he just wasn't the right dude for that suit.
Yeah.
But maybe another one.
Yeah. Oh, something else I just remembered that I enjoyed that this a series did was address the blip.
Yeah.
Steve's Sam's sister is in this. She's still holding down the fort in New Orleans, and struggling with the fact that half the population is back, and jobs are now gone, and they're talking about having to maybe sell their boat. That it was their family business. They go in for a loan. And get denied, that's such a great scene because the smarmy bank guy is, when he realizes who Sam is, like, oh, thank you so much for what you did. Can I have a selfie? No, you can't have a loan.
Yeah.
It's just kind of heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
But I'm glad they did, bring it up. They touched on it a little bit in Spider-Man, but I don't think nearly enough. And it's only so much you can do without completely dragging down entire movie, but they can expand on it a little bit here.
I mean, it was a big old matzo ball when they did it in Endgame. I was shocked. That was not what I was expecting them to do. Yeah. They already had time travel written in. I was fully expecting them to wind everything back and go, here we are at the end of Infinity War and we just saved the day. And the past 5 years or something, only we remember. Pretty typical comic book stuff.
I did think it was unclear. They never specified if his sister was blipped away or not. I think the kids probably were, because
they were still young.
Yeah. But I don't know. They didn't mention that. That would have been a little, I think, time crunchy. But they didn't talk about that. It was just the effect of, having half the population suddenly return.
Yeah. And of course, Bucky's the other half of this whole, show.
We haven't even talked about Bucky yet.
And he's got his whole arc of, trying to, dealing with this therapist and who's got him like, you need to, make good. And if you actually want to, move forward, you need to go, tell people things. Which is, incredibly hard. That's part of why it's, part of AA. But yeah, I thought his storyline was really solid. I did see something. There was a kind of a nefarious, infamous tweet, I guess I should say, of someone who was like, "Oh, this show's so messed up. Bucky would feel so betrayed by the Wakandans when one of the Dora Milaje takes his arm off, hits that he'd finally learned trust." I was like, you were reading a lot.
What?
I got where he was coming from, but I was like, but I don't agree.
No.
Them building in fail-safes is how the Wakandans have gotten along for a long time. That's totally in character.
Well, also he picks it up in the next scene and puts it back on. It's not like they took his arm back.
Yeah, and it was. It was an interesting take. It was a very huggy-feely, I've been through therapy, very, very sweet take, but not one I agreed with. I'm hoping for a little bit more, with Bucky. I guess he's probably going to continue on in the Captain America movies.
I would imagine.
They did introduce a character who I think will be reappearing. There's a similar character to the young Air Force guy that Sam's working with at the beginning. Yeah. And you'll notice he leaves his wings with that guy. He goes, I'm off, I'm done, I'm going to go do other things, and leaves the wings with that kid. So don't be too shocked if you see that kid show up in a familiar title in the near future. But yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed it. I haven't gone back to watch it again, even though every time an episode of Loki would finish, Bucky and Sam would be staring at us over their shoulders on Disney Plus.
They're judging us.
Yeah. It's hard. It's much harder. The movies, when we finish them, I mean, honestly, the Captain Americas we'd see 2 or 3 times in the theater. And then...
Yeah, if we liked one of the movies, we would for sure go back and watch it again.
Yeah, and then we get it on Blu-ray or watch it on cable or whatever, and it's a lot harder to go, I'm gonna rewatch 6 hours of TV.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, speaking of 6 hours of TV, Loki just wrapped.
We got another one to get through. Loki was maybe my favorite of all the 3.
Okay. Wrong answer. No, I'm teasing. I'm curious as to why, though.
I enjoyed all of them. I don't know. This is maybe a cop-out, but I'm going to say I thought it stuck the landing better than the other 2 did, but it also has a cheat in that there's going to be another season. So they didn't have to wrap everything up. In fact, it ends on kind of a cliffhanger. So, yeah, it's...
That was literally my only problem with the show.
They didn't end it?
Yeah. I was like, you can end it and still have another season.
Yeah.
You can even end it with a lot of questions. But they just kind of were like, wah, wah.
Yeah.
We'll be back. And I was like...
I don't feel like writing an ending.
When will you be back?
Yeah. I mean, the amount of time it takes to get these shows done, it's going to be more than a year.
I was a huge fan of the show in general.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy Loki as a character. I mean, he's done a lot of bad crap, but this show doesn't ignore that. It leans into it.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of just explores why he does the things he does.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that statement at all. I have always thought Loki was an interesting character because he was always just a wounded kid. Mm-hmm. And I think, if you watch the little documentary afterward, under the name Assembled, I want to say is what it's called. So if you haven't watched it, there's an hour-long thing that's they always have these making of for these things, and they talk about how it's about his self-acceptance, which is really kind of what he needed. He wasn't going to get that from his glorious purpose of taking over the Earth for Thanos, or the various other schemes he's had up his sleeve, which I think it's maybe the 4th episode where he quits plotting how he's going to angle to take over the TVA or whatever I
feel like it's when he runs into I need
Sylvie.
Sylvie, thank you. I need to switch over to Loki IMDb. There we go. Sylvie is another version of Loki, which, if you're listening to this and haven't watched the show, shame on you. Why are you even listening to this? Yeah, so Sylvie is a female version of Loki who was abandoned. She was taken from Asgard because she was deemed to be not the part of the true timeline by the TVA. So, and thus she's been running from them her entire life. And so she's another wounded child. I mean, same story.
Mm-hmm. Very different wounding, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
She is based loosely, as I understand it, Simon up in Canada will be very sad that I am not much of a Thor reader. He's a huge Thor fan from the Walt Simonson era and before. That in this, she's kind of a mix of a character who was like as I think I read like Loki just kind of made her out of magic, and she was like kind of existed sort of thing, and then they decided she's like a real person, but she was
like, he decided he wanted a buddy or
something like
minion
that.
Or
Something like that. And she was on Young Avengers. There was a series called Young Avengers that had kind of a spin-off from the Isaiah Bradley thing, a character called Patriot, who was his grandson, who was the kid who was running around in the background. And she's also somewhat similar to Enchantress, who was a big Thor villain, and I only know Enchantress because they always drew her as like sexy blonde lady showing lots of cleavage, and they would put her in lots of group scenes, and then in like various Marvel publications in the 80s.
Cool.
But I don't know much about her other than she was kind of a major Thor villain, and she enchants people. That's her bag, man.
Yeah.
So clearly, that's not what they decided to do with this version of Enchantress or Sylvie or whatever they're calling her. And the other interesting thing to me about this is like maybe 20 years ago. So 35 years ago, there was a big comic event called Crisis on Infinite Earths in DC Comics, where DC had all of these Earths in a huge multiverse, and DC decided, this is too complicated. We're going to have a big event, and we're going to collapse everything down into a single Earth. And it happened in 1986. Boom. And then DC has spent the past 35 years trying to unpack what they did with that event and get back to what they had, because it was basically in a lot of ways, a huge failure. People it's very handy in comic books to have multiple universes and dimensions and all that sort of thing. And it's not that hard to keep track of. You just have to go, oh, that's like the Batman of France. Instead of the Batman of France, you go, that's the Batman of Earth 3 or whatever. Yeah. So Marvel never really played in this world. Like, that wasn't their bag, was the whole multi-universal thing. And DC and its movies and TV shows, they had a Crisis event on the CW TV shows, where they even referenced, like, the Flash from the movie showed up in the Flash TV show. But the multiverse thing has never really been Marvel's bag. They barely go cosmic. Like, they're not...
No, you'd never know from the movies.
Yeah, I mean, so it's really wild to me that they're like, we're putting a line in the sand, because from this, then we're supposed to get into the next Spider-Man movie, supposed to have a whole bunch of versions of Spider-Man. And of course, we had
the next Doctor Strange movies, the Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah, and we already had Into the Spider-Verse. And so Marvel's kind of done this weird thing of putting a line in the sand and going, we're going to own the idea of multiverse. And DC's going, but we're doing it too, but no one pays attention. But I don't care. I mean, I do care, but I think it's fine. I'm not like, oh, that's not Marvel. DC owns that. DC does own it in the comics world, but but it's also been like DC. You can see in the comics them constantly trying to fix things at editorial with how they're doing their multiverse stuff, versus Marvel's just like, we got a multiverse. It's crazy. Like, they're not trying to fix things with it. And they had their own Crisis event, I'd say, about 5 years ago, and I don't really remember how all of that panned out. But anyway,
I thought that was the most enjoyable part of this, with all the Lokis. I mean, it's not...
They added Richard E. Grant as classic Loki. Like, my brain just freaking fried.
They have a little alligator Loki. That part was so great. Well, and it actually had some character development, because original Loki, our Loki that we're following, finds himself in this big Loki brawl.
Yeah.
And he's realizing, like, what he is and how insane he is, and he just decides, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't know that he's going to stick to that. I mean, but for that moment, he was having some real self-realization, I think.
So about the time the first Thor movie came out, or shortly after, Loki had become wildly popular, of course. And in the comics, Loki is no longer a bad guy. I don't mean to spoil things for people.
Is he an anti-hero, or is he a full... Okay.
He hangs around Thor, but now he and Thor are like, dapping, like, and like hanging out and
being bros,
yeah, and in Asgard, and I don't think that that's a bad path for them to follow. Of like, Loki can do the things Thor can't, because he's a little shadier.
Yeah.
I've only seen a little bit. I've been reading recently I think it's Donny Cates, maybe, who's writing Thor right now. But it's good stuff. I'm enjoying it. But anyway, yeah, I thought that's a really good way to put it, of like him seeing himself from all these angles and going, oh my God, I can't be this person anymore. Yeah, I hadn't quite put it together that way. But yeah, Richard E. Grant shows up, of all people, who I mean, we talked about him in the With Nail and I podcast And, he's this guy who's been around, in England and the US kind of forever in various roles. And he's really enjoying this part of his career, I think.
Oh, yeah.
But showing up in what was that's what Loki looked like in the comics
the
for
leotards.
30 years. Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing. And then it's a little heartbreaking that, the one Loki that he finds himself relating to is Sylvie. And, they want to really get into the romance part of that and what all that entails. But, they did do smooch in the last episode. Mm-hmm. But then and he thinks he's really gotten to her and they're seeing eye to eye, and then they don't. Mm-hmm. I mean, they had this huge falling out on into what should happen to the TVA and to all these timelines. It's this huge decision, and she disagrees with him and does her own thing. And I think he was really heartbroken by that.
Yeah, and I think that'll drive, whatever happens in the next, batch of episodes or whenever, because I guess Love and Thunder is coming soon as well. And I don't know if we're going to see Sylvie pop up in, upcoming episodes or whatever, but, or upcoming movies. But, yeah, it's... It's interesting to see all this stuff. I guess that guy at the end, we haven't even talked about the TVA, but I guess the guy at the very end is supposed to be Kang?
That's what I had been reading on some forums.
I mean, my Kang is a guy with a purple hood and a blue face, so I was like, I don't know who this guy is, but I guess it's Kang.
I had not heard of Kang before I started reading the forums, so yeah.
I first became aware of Kang in the... toy aisle at Skaggs Alpha Beta when the Secret Wars action figures were coming out. I believe that was my first exposure to Kang. But like I've always said, I'm not a huge Avengers reader. He's a huge Avengers villain. Mm-hmm. But I don't know much about Kang. But all my Avengers reading friends, ooh, Kang! I'm like, all right, cool. You guys are excited, so I'm excited. So that's supposed to be, I guess, leading into phase 18 or whatever we are with Marvel. I don't know what we're in anymore.
And just doubling down on his loss of Sylvie, he goes back to the TVA, and his first friends he's maybe made in his life, real friends, or people that he doesn't hate, don't remember him.
Yeah,
because everything's changed.
Yeah,
and it's just crushing.
Yeah, this gives us an opportunity to talk a little bit about TVA and Owen Wilson and all of that as well.
So the little bit that I gathered from watching the assembled episode that we saw on this is that the TVA does exist in the comics, but I don't know how big of a thing it is, or if it was a one-off or something.
I'd never heard of it before this show, which doesn't mean anything.
Sure.
I think it's something somebody did that was, I think it was a Walt Simonson thing, and they were kind of having some fun. I think it's a really cool idea. It was, I guess, always a super, weirdly bureaucratic thing. It was a
fantastic idea for this show. I mean, just they really nailed the depression in an office environment, and just bringing it to something as wacky as a Loki TV show is just brilliant.
And that's the kind of the amazing thing about these Marvel movies is people just go along with okay, why not?
Okay, we're doing this. Yeah. It's this weird 70s vibe, but it's also futuristic, and it's lost in time, which it's supposed to be.
Right. A lot was said about the design on this, and I'm going to say something a little unfair. Legion was a show that Marvel had on FX. It was a spin-off of the X movies. And no one watched it. It was really, really good.
It was good.
And the design,
it was completely bonkers, but it was good.
And honestly, the cinematography and design, it was by the same guy who does Fargo, Noah Hawley.
Yeah. It was a beautiful show.
Yeah, it was. If you like the look and feel of Loki, go and watch the first 2 seasons of Legion, because it very much is that same aesthetic. And honestly, in the first few minutes of Loki, I got a little like, oh man, Legion already did this. But I think it's different enough and special enough that it became its own thing to me.
Yeah.
But do go check out just Brother from Another Mother sort of thing. What they did with some of that stuff in Legion, because it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
And Owen Wilson, I mean, what great casting for what they were trying to get done.
Yeah, and he bounces off of Tom Hiddleston so well. I mean, they just have such different energies, but at the same time, they just click. They have an entire scene that must be like 20 minutes long of them just talking in a room, and it's captivating.
Yeah. Of a Marvel action show sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah. And really getting to the core of who Loki is, like...
Yeah.
Which you can never do in a movie.
No. An art house Loki movie.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
no one would go see that.
Yeah. I mean, it made me kind of want to see them cast Owen Wilson as like Philip Marlowe to see what would happen.
Oh, sure. Yeah, because he is kind of like a detective in this.
Yeah. And, you know, he's got enough kind of like weird Texan in him that like I just totally bought like everything about what Owen Wilson, because Owen Wilson was just kind of doing like, he's a really smart guy, and you can just kind of feel that in the character and kind of how he approaches the whole thing. And then even the shift in power balance when he's with, I can't remember, Judge Ravona.
Renslayer.
Judge Renslayer.
I'm going to attempt her name. Gugu Mbatha? No. Mbatha Raw. I apologize. That's a mouthful.
Hey, you took a flying leap at it. You missed, but
I missed. She's fantastic, as is Hunter B-15.
Yeah.
She's so good. I mean, both of them, I think they're both British. Probably have been around for a long time, but it's another thing about these Marvel movies is they bring to the forefront these fantastic actors that you may not have heard of before. So they get some attention.
Yeah, and really changing, from what I understand, changing the Judge from what she had been in the comics. I think she's an associate of Kang's in the comics, but with the couple images I saw of her, she's, you know, brightly colored, you know, whatever space person, and you know, here, you know, she's another bureaucrat. She's in a, you know, a sort of military tribunal business suit sort of thing.
But that was a fascinating twist that, I mean, not a twist so much, because you know somebody at the TVA has got to know that there's something going on with the evil lizard overlords.
And I mean, we've all seen Wizard of Oz.
Right. But she doesn't entirely know what's going on.
No. I don't think she knows what's going on when the show ends. So.
Yeah. But she's still loyal.
Yeah. Now, unlike WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it's a little harder to say. You know, there's always this thing of comics lose their way when they become about themselves. And, you know, with WandaVision, we're like, this is a woman grieving. When we talk about Falcon and Winter Soldier, we're talking about, you know, these kind of abstractions of how people deal with each other and questions of power at these very high levels and how, the people underneath it kind of live. And I think you can make that same argument in some ways about Loki. But Loki is very much a character study of Loki by having this refraction. But I haven't quite decided it's got the same totally obvious core that those other two shows had, that I kind of had as my, well, that's what this thing's really about.
Yeah. I have to just give props to Tom Hiddleston also. Apparently he is like a Loki expert, Like, he sat everyone down in the cast and said, I'm going to give you a lecture, a PowerPoint presentation, no less, on the character of Loki. But he enters this not as the Loki that we're familiar with by Infinity War. That's the last we see of real-time Loki. He enters this as the guy who just left Avengers. He was just gonna take over Earth. I mean, that's where he was when and you'd get that from this. So he has to be educated on what happens in the rest of the series, so that he can be a little more sympathetic. And he, I think, just nails it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question he's a terrific actor. I will be very curious to see what else people decide to put him in. I know he's doing other things all the time. The only thing I'm really aware of that they released in the States was, I think it was a Bob Wills movie.
I don't know. The only thing I've seen him in, sadly, was it
was Hank Williams. They made a Hank Williams, and it wasn't Bob Wills.
Was the Skull Island.
Oh, right.
Which he was criminally misused, and everyone in that movie was criminally misused.
But you're going to make a bunch of Kong Skull Island fans very upset with you right now.
Too bad. They hired a bunch of actors and didn't use them. But that's not the movie we're talking about.
No. But yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't want to go off on Kong Skull Island, but yeah. Oh yeah, he just hasn't shown up in a whole ton of stuff, and it would be, nice to get him doing, even if he got another franchise thing. I mean,
yeah. I mean, they even mentioned in the Symbol episode that we watched that Loki really hasn't gotten that much screen time. He just has made such an impression of made the best use of the time that he had on screen. That he's such a popular character. So I'm pleased that he got so much time to kind of flesh out his character.
That's one of the advantages of being a villain. Is you get to be very direct about who you are. True.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even when you're being totally indirect about who you are. So.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's why, you get these really good actors who are wanting these roles and are, wanting a piece of it, because it is this big playground to kind of play in, and you can't go too over the top in a lot of ways. I mean, Loki's a very over the top character, especially if you watch him in the first Avengers movie. I mean, there's nothing subtle about what he's up to in that movie, because he's finally there. He's going to do his thing, right?
Yeah.
And he's outsmarted everybody.
He's still that person in the first half of the first episode till he gets taken down a peg when they take away his magic.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious.
Yeah. The drawer full of Infinity Stones was chef's kiss.
Yeah.
I was such a fan of that decision. But yeah, I mean, I didn't have anything that really made me in Loki say this isn't working, that I thought was too confusing. I didn't really feel like they wasted any time, like they were using their time very, very well. It managed to have something that, in addition to kind of the 30-minute kind of interrogation sequence, it also has this sequence that I think first showed up in Daredevil, where they're like, we're going to have a whole action sequence where there's not a whole lot of cuts, and it's just going to keep going. And if you ever watch the Netflix Daredevil, they did one of those per season, and every time it was kind of like, it's coming, and in this one, it's really a chase. They're running through this alien outpost city or
they're on an exploding planet, and they got to get off. They got to get to the rescue pod.
Yeah, and it's incredibly well done. It, as far as action direction goes, especially non-combat action direction, I was absolutely blown away. And I'm just going, how much did this cost the whole time?
Yeah, I was too, and I honestly thought that they had done a Mandalorian and just, CGI'd it, but in the making of, they said, no, this is a real set that we built. This is a huge, huge set. It's so impressive.
Yeah.
It looks fantastic, and it's a TV show.
Yeah. And a lot of it that I assumed Now, I guess, like, the inside of the TVA looks like maybe it was the inside of a hotel. But they then put a lot of CGI, like, beyond to extend, like, when they're in the library.
I mean, I just assumed they used their studio in Atlanta for all of that.
There was scenes that they showed in the making of where they were, like, at the reference tables, like, reading the materials, and there's people walking by in the background, and it was just like almost looked like if you're at Embassy Suites and you're looking across, like, people just walking by. Now, in the show itself, that was extended. Those were all bookshelves. Those were...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, those were library stacks.
I guess I missed that. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, there's just incredible visuals in this thing. And of course, they hired Tara Strong, who's a very famous voice actor, to be Ms. Minutes.
Ms. Minutes was creepy as hell. Oh my god,
I think Tara Strong really enjoyed doing that. Yeah.
So, like, on the surface, like, welcoming, and just this undertone of, but I could kill you at any moment.
Yeah.
It's a cartoon clock. Yeah. It's just fantastic.
Anyway, thoroughly enjoyable, and I'll be really curious to see where it goes.
Yeah. And I love the music, too. I just have to mention that.
Please.
I don't even know who wrote... I'm sitting here in front of IMDb, but it's the cast list. Mm-hmm. So whoever the composer was on this, just super creative and just fit the tone of the show perfectly. It's just kind of a little bit wacky, but kind of mysterious at the same time. It's so great. And
working in the kind of clock click to the theme. Yeah.
I mean, the opening and closing credits of all of these shows have been just top notch. Like, we sit there and watch. Part of it is you're waiting for any maybe mid credits or end credit sequence, but I like just sitting and watching the credits. They're enjoyable.
One of the things that has been true that Marvel has done a huge pivot on is the number of women who are involved with these movies or TV shows. I'm calling them movies, but when Marvel started, it was it was Hollywood in 2007 or whatever. I mean, it was Jon Favreau and a bunch of dudes working on this stuff. If you watch the behind the scenes of Iron Man. And now it's both this, Falcon and the Winter Soldier were both directed by women. A bunch of the roles on this one were by women. And costume designer, just lots and lots of things.
I think the director of photography might have been
she was
a woman.
Yeah. And man, yeah, the amazing job she did. I mean, not just that the sets were already really good, but knew how to work tension into a scene. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing what the, like, we have a goal, we're going to try and meet it, of we're going to hire, a higher percentage of women and minorities, who are apparently all waiting in the wings, ready to go.
We're here.
Yeah. And so it's
well, I think it brings up, fresh eyes to these projects too. It's not just that, we need to give them a chance. It's like, they're freaking good at their jobs, and it's a different perspective. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that this stuff is still coming out and still surprising, like with all the movies and now, 3 TV series in, is kind of an amazing feat. I don't care if you say you're burnt out on superheroes and superhero origins or whatever. It's like what Marvel's doing. And I know I say this almost every Marvel podcast, but unprecedented, absolutely amazing what they've been able to pull off. Just on pretty much every level with this thing. I can't imagine in 10 years what this thing is going to be.
It's not just the fact that people haven't gotten burned out on superhero stories. It's the same studio that people haven't gotten burned out on, and they're still looking forward to what they've got coming up.
Well, I mean, when you say, and we've talked about before, what do you mean when you say Western? Do you like Westerns? And I'm like, well, you're really talking about a time period. You're not talking about, are you talking about someone cattle rustling? Or are you talking about like people fighting over like a woman in a town? Like, what are you talking about when you say Western? And the term's kind of meaningless because after after Stagecoach, basically the genre exploded and was kind of whatever you wanted it to be. We got to just separate ourselves to tell these stories a little bit in time in order to tell the story we want to tell. And I think like Marvel has really clued into the fact of we can tell any kind of story we want to. That's the amazing thing about comics.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like there's all these subgenres within the superhero dome. Mm-hmm. That I think DC has struggled with.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean,
that
was part of the problem.
A lot of their movies feel the same.
Yeah, and saying we're going to let a single person dictate, mm-hmm. In Zack Snyder, what all of this stuff's going to be and feel like, has what Kevin Feige has done has been more of a traffic cop and a quality control, as people have brought different things up that they might want to do.
Yeah, and that keeps the movies feeling fresh and new.
Mm-hmm. So we'll see what DC decides that they're going to do. I mean, they are now saying, I've seen a couple of announcements in the past few weeks of there's going to be a Batgirl something that's going to hit HBO Max. So they're looking at HBO Max as their platform.
It might be the best thing for them.
And I think that's a good scale for Batgirl. Like, Batgirl doesn't need to be like potentially on the moon like Batman might need to be. Like literally, like Batman's got stuff going on the moon. So Batman's going to be Batman. But Batgirl's kind of someone who rides around on a motorcycle in a city. But there's also, I think, confirmed that Michael B. Jordan's working on a Earth 2 Superman thing.
Yeah, I read that.
Val Zod. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, as they kind of baby step their way away from, what kind of has been and kind of look at, like, this is embarrassing. Like, Marvel's just absolutely eating our lunch. Yeah, it's just absolutely amazingly impressive what they're able to pull off. When you see the alternative, I guess I should say.
Yeah. Yep. I don't know how long we've been going.
We have been going for exactly an hour.
All right. Well, if you have not watched these two shows, what is wrong with you? I'm just kidding. Do so. I hope we haven't spoiled them for you.
Yeah. We'll be back soon. I think the next show up is What If, which I'm really looking forward to.
Oh, yeah.
Because I want to see U2 on the TV. It'll be, I think they're going to use this multiverse thing to do all their exploration. They now have an excuse to say, what if? So, yeah, we'll be back soon. I don't know what the next Marvel movie is either. I think you said it in the Black Widow podcast, but I don't know. Something's coming.
The 10 Rings or
Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I'm actually really looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
That one, the trailer on that looked amazing. So, all right, we'll be back soon. Bye.
Bye.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.